This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. Respectonomics is bringing you living economics, and this is the 25th episode of Living Economics. And what we're doing here is talking about the current economic situation and particularly looking at it in the context of the climate. My name is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I am your voice. I am your year of Respectonomics. And I have said frequently and repeatedly, we'd be really great if you would let us have your thoughts, your criticisms, your adulations, if you like, but whatever you want to do, send them to us. Jeremy@respectonomics.com. Jeremy@respectonomics.com. We're talking about the economy and we're talking about the climate. Now, we often think about the economy and talk about the climate, and we, of course, we're referring to the economic climate, which is a reasonable point of view. And you start thinking in terms of whether it's favorable, whether it's got a sense of growth attached to it, whether, people have cash, liquidity, whether the banks are lending, whether people are traveling, consumer confidence, business confidence, rates of inflation, etc. But the climate we're talking about now is what would you call it? The climate, meaning the meteorology of our surroundings. Everybody's got an opinion on the climate. I don't want to get into that because you can start talking about climate deniers. You can get into people who think that it's everybody's fault and what we all need to do. And the answer is what we all need to do and what we think we all agree to want to do are very, very different things and causes a lot of friction. But let's take another point of view about the climate and let us agree on one point, and that is that the temperatures and the conditions of our climate are becoming more extreme. You talk about snowstorms that are bigger, longer, and deeper than ones we've had in the past. More currently, here we are in July of 2026, and we've already experienced some extraordinary wildfires in northern Canada and northern Ontario, and the damage that it's done through the smoke and the terrible destruction it's creating, not only in the forests themselves, but of course in the communities, isolated though they may be. And we can go, as I say, repeatedly talk about the issues of the climate and how they've happened and so on. It's worth remembering that in 1683 and then into 1684, there was the deep freeze in England. And that's when they were having, can you imagine? They were having horse races on the River Thames because the ice was so thick. The point I'm getting there is only to say that the climate has much to say that we don't really have as much control of it. We can talk a bit about the things that we do that are injurious to the climate, injurious to the atmosphere and so on. And we talk about pollution and toxins and so on. And presumably that old maxim of waste not, want not is about as good as it gets. Why would we be wasting the climate that creates then a time when we really want it? And of course, it's been destroyed. So waste not, want not is a good theme to work with. In the meantime, let's take a look at the economic fallout from the climate issues. And because we've got these issues of extremes, which takes us through fires, earthquakes, floods, ice, when we think of all of those things, think about the areas that are affected. And this is what would you call it, a capsule list with all the risks of not including everything and everybody. But you think of agriculture and the strains that it puts on it, entertainment, that people can't get to shows and they can't get production going, travel plans. We were going to go somewhere, but we couldn't because all the planes had been cancelled, road trips had been cancelled. Along the same lines, transportation. the difficulties of getting a train across a bridge that no longer exists. We think in terms of flows of goods and services. We may, in a sort of almost facetious way, say that we couldn't get something in the middle of the winter, and that may be the flow of a good that matters to us, but still. And then there's housing and the risks of being able to continue with construction at a time when we're trying to build more houses for more people. What this all comes down to is the climate has an enormous bearing and significance influence on the ways in which not only do we live in terms of our own, what you might call personal lives, but also has a significant bearing on the efficacy and the productivity of the economy. Now, this leads to two things. The first thing is we have to be looking at how does the climate affect productivity, and the likelihood is that it's going to diminish productivity, which results in, frankly, goods and services becoming more expensive. Plain English, it's inflationary. We look at the way the climate affects the output of food and recognize then the upward bias it puts on food prices. So we can look at the sort of the day-to-day living issues as how they are influenced in an inflationary context. And there's one of the things we should consider. But there's another part to this puzzle that needs our attention, and that is that whatever the causes of these, let's just say, climate issues, climate problems are, whatever the causes are, we are going to have more capital, more funding, more spending, more money, more cash put into abatement and remediation. We'll need to think about how do we protect, let's say, a city from bad air? How do we make sure that the roads can stay open more effectively during a winter storm? How do we control the forest fires? And all of these can do things. We can do them, but they are inherently, they're very expensive. And here's the snag. We know, therefore, that there's going to be this great outlay needed, this great expenditure, at a time when we're already knocking ourselves out silly with deficits, spending, and lack of constraint, fiscally or monetarily. And I mean, these are big words, but the truth of the matter is we're not paying a lot of attention to the homegrown, homespun economy anyway. We're borrowing. We've got credit card debt going through the roof. We've got corporate debt that is beyond imagination, government debt beyond imagination. You've got all these debts that are building and building and building, and not paying attention to something that is going to require the proverbial trillions of dollars, literally, so that we can get goods to market, so that we can have services, and depending a little bit on who you talk to, so that we can breathe. We're talking about some fairly basic stuff here. If you think in terms of the human being, of body, mind, and spirit, there's not much that isn't affected in those three by the climate. The climate affects our bodies, it affects our minds, it affects our souls. It is a very, very important dynamic, and we will require all kinds of leadership to pay attention, and paying attention will be to spend money. So what we're looking at here is the climate is not only an inherent risk unto itself, but it is also one that carries great economic burden, puts additional demands on government spending at a time when governments have already overspent. And there's one more thing to think about. How often do we say, well, we had an accident, or my house got destroyed in a storm, or whatever it would be? I'm not being flippant about it, but the answer is, I will talk to my insurance company. And I think we need to look at underwriting capacity or insurance capacity to find out what exactly is the capacity when we get major floods, major storms, and major breakdowns in economies and communities resulting strictly from the climate issues. These costs are going to be rising all the time. We have to think in terms of the inherent stability of the insurance companies, the demands that are made upon them, and whether or not they have the capacity. And if an insurance company doesn't have capacity, guess who does have the capacity? It's going to be the homeowner, the automobile owner, the aeroplane owner, and so on. In other words, the premiums will be escalating disproportionately and be on our shoulders. Now, this may all sound rather negative, but it is. It's more of this canary in the mine here. The canary in the mine is the climate. The climate is giving us due notice that not all is going well. We need to understand that the climate itself is a problem and is going to need some kind of approach, some kind of rapprochement, some kind of reconciliation. And then we have to think about the economic spillover, the outcomes of all the expenses, the funding that is needed to put these things in order. To state the obvious, if we could bring our climate into a more manageable, I don't know how you manage the climate, but if we are doing things that are injurious to the climate, it makes absolute sense that we should be addressing those issues. And like everything in life, just like when you go on a trip and you think in terms of multiple preparations and all the things you need, we're going to need to do many things to deal with the climate financially, from a lifestyle point of view, from the standpoint of what is it that we are going to be leaving our children and grandchildren? What is the legacy that we're leaving them? We can't very well be saying, I'm taking a deep breath and bad luck, you can't. Well, that's not the right way to approach the next generation, is it? So there you have it. And I think that we need to be demanding on our leadership today, economically, corporately, politically. We need to be saying to the leaders, you've got to start taking control of the spending because the physical demands on spending are going to be significant and enormous in the foreseeable future. That's at the sort of the macro level, the micro level, meaning what do I do about it? What do you do about it? Think in terms of interruptions in services, interruptions in goods that you would typically have maybe in your pantry or maybe at your desk, wherever they might be, and think about the things that are very important to you. It might be as straightforward as coffee, it might be index cards, but whatever it is that you depend on, start thinking about those things and start putting them away. I don't want to say for the rainy day, but I think for the stormy day, we need to be thinking about putting those kinds of things away. People will often ask us, what do we do in the sort of the big scheme of economics? And the answer is, we do not know. The scope of the economy today is unpredictable. There are issues that are on left side, right side, underside, top side. We don't actually understand a lot of these things. And if you as a homeowner or a household owner or a manager of your household, if you find that you don't know the answer, I can guarantee you that that is pervasive all the way up to the proverbial top, that people at the top do not understand either. To make it rather sort of clearer, if people at the top did understand, we wouldn't have the problems we have today, would we? There it is. Think about the climate. Think about what it might mean to you. And I suppose our leaving off question tonight is, or this afternoon, is here we are in July, hot weather and everything. Have you thought about the climate? Have you thought about how it might impinge on your economic well-being?